So we're going to take a look at Pythagoras Theorem. So the first thing to understand about Pythagoras Theorem is that it only applies to right-angle triangles. And typically we label up the sides of the triangle in this way. But it doesn't really matter whether A's there and B's there. The important one is C. Now C is known as the hypotenuse. It's the longest side of the triangle. So Pythagoras' theorem tells us if we measure this and square the length of that, and measure this and square the length of that, and then add those two together, they will be the same size as if we just square this one. So the most crucial thing is you need to know the formula, which is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but the important thing is to recognize and know that the c is always this longest side. So let's do a couple of examples. So here's the first one. So we've got a diagram here, and this is meant to be a wall, that's the floor, and this line here is a ladder. So it tells us that the length of the ladder here is 4 meters, and it tells us here at the bottom that it's 1.5 meters away from the wall at the bottom. So the question then asks us, work out how far the ladder reaches up the wall. So in other words, we're trying to work out this distance here. So if we ignore the extra bits sticking up there, we've basically got a triangle, and we need to work out what that side is. So let's go back to our Pythagoras theorem, because that's what we're going to use. So one of the things you can do to keep yourself out of trouble is to label it right now. Okay, so this is our C, remember, because it's the longest side. And then, as I say, it doesn't matter which you call A and B here, but I'm going to call that A. So that's our B. So now let's go and get our formula. It's always a good idea to write formulas just as they are to start with, and then substitute in your values afterwards. So we don't know what A is, so we've got A squared plus B squared, which is B is 1.5, so we've got 1.5 squared equals C squared. C is 4, so we've got 4 squared here. Okay, so A squared plus, let's grab the calculator here. So we want 1.5 squared, and that is 2.25, and that equals 4 squared. Hopefully you don't need the calculator for that. That's 16. So we want to know what A is. So we've got to solve this equation now that we've got and work out what A is. So we're going to take away 2.25 from both sides. So we'll have A squared left on this side, and on this side, use your calculator if you want to, we've got 16, take away 2.25, which equals 13.75. So now we know that A squared equals 13.75, so the final thing we need to do is square root both sides, because we don't want A squared, we actually only want A. So we want this A is equal to the square root of 13.75. So let's find out what that is. So square root 13.75 is 3.708 going on forever. We'll just do it to 2 decimal places. So that would be 3.71. Let's look at a couple more examples. So here we go. So we've got another triangle, and we're told that the length of this side is 8 and the length of this side is 15, and they're asking us to work out the length of the third side. So we're going to use Pythagoras, so let's write it down again, and let's label our sides. So remember, this is the important one, which is C. You can call these A or B, it doesn't matter. Let's call that one A and that one B. So let's put those into our formula. So A I've called 8, so that's 8 squared plus B, which is 15, so 15 squared equals C squared. So 8 squared is 64, and 15 squared is, well, let's just double check it there, but I'm fairly certain it's 225. And that equals C squared. So if we add the 64 and the 225 together, we get 289. So C squared equals 289, but we only want C, so we're going to need to square root both sides. So C will be the square root of 289, which happens to be 17. So the length of this one is 17 centimetres in this case. One final one. Okay, so new triangle. Here it's 20. Here it's 6. Our formula is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. This is the important one. This is C. I'm going to call this A and this B over here. Okay, so we put it into our formula. So we don't know A, so we leave that there. B is 6, so we want 6 squared equals C squared, which is 20 squared. So we've got A squared plus 6 squared, which is 36, and 20 squared, 20 times 20, is going to give us 400. So we want to get A on its own, so we're going to take away the 36 from both sides. So that gives us A squared equals 364. And then last of all, we're going to need to square root both sides. So A equals the square root of 364. If we bring the calculator in for that, so the square root of 364 equals 19 point, and they've asked for 1 decimal place, so it's 19.07, so it'll be 19.1 centimetres.